Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ here. Welcome to the program. Now on tonight's headlines.
The Philippines will shut its borders to foreigners arriving from 20 countries and territories in a bid to prevent a new strain of coronavirus entering the nation.
The chief of WHO Emergency Response Program says that society needs to ready itself for a more severe pandemic in the future.
Indonesia will temporarily close its borders to all foreign nationals starting January 1 to the 14th of next year. And the Philippine Embassy in Jakarta reminded Filipinos planning to travel to the neighboring countries.
And a Hong Kong teenager was ordered to spend 4 months in prison on Tuesday for insulting China's national flag and unlawful assembly as Beijing increasingly targets prominent activists from the financial hub.
First, in Geneva, the chief of WHO Emergency Response Program, Dr. Michael Ryan, said that society needs to ready itself for a more severe pandemic in the future. He said that 2020 is a wake-up call for society as a whole. Meanwhile, WHO Senior Advisor Bruce Aylward also cautioned that while the world had made huge scientific progress to address the coronavirus crisis, including developing vaccines at record speed, it remained far from prepared to ward off future pandemics. Let's listen in.
This pandemic has been very severe. It's spread around the world extremely quickly and has affected every corner of this planet. But this is not necessarily the big one. This virus is very transmissible, and it kills people, and it has deprived so many people of loved ones. But its current case fatality is reasonably low in comparison to other emerging diseases. This is a wake-up call. The planet is fragile. We live in an increasingly complex global society. These threats will continue. If there's one thing we need to take from this pandemic, with all of the tragedy and loss, is that we need to get our act together. We need to get ready for something that may even be more severe in future. In this, we must honor those we've lost by getting better at what we do every day.
But this virus is telling us we are not prepared. We're still not prepared. As Mike said and others, we're now into second and third waves of this virus, and we're still not prepared to deal with and manage those. So while we are better prepared, the real question is, are we prepared, and are we prepared for the next one? We're not fully prepared for this one, let alone the next one. The other thing is we're prepared for flu better than we were in the past. We're now better prepared for coronaviruses, but are we better prepared for the next pandemic? We don't know what the next pandemic is. We don't know what that next virus is, and it would be folly to say that we're fully prepared. There's still a lot, and if anything, at the end of 2020, we should be humbled by the fact that we will always be preparing for these viruses.
England is back in the eye of the coronavirus storm. Health chiefs warned Tuesday with as many patients in hospital as during the initial peak in April. A new strain of the virus appears to be behind the recent upsurge in cases, heaping further pressure on the state-run National Health Service during its busiest winter period. NHS England figures showed there were 20,426 COVID patients in the country's hospitals on Monday, compared to the 18,974 peak recorded during the first wave. The number of positive tests recorded over a 24-hour period also hit a new high of 41,385 Monday, according to government figures, although testing is now much more extensive. London and Southeast England are currently bearing the brunt of the outbreak, with paramedics in the capital saying they are receiving up to 8,000 emergency calls each day. London Ambulance Service said Boxing Day, December 26, was one of its busiest days ever. A further 357 people testing positive for the virus were announced on Monday to have died, bringing the UK total to 71,109, the second worst toll in Europe. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been under fire for his government's handling of the pandemic and is now under pressure to introduce even more social restrictions, including school closures after the Christmas break. Britain is pinning its hopes on its mass vaccination program, with the Oxford AstraZeneca jab expected to receive approval shortly, according to reports.
And the United States began a coronavirus vaccination campaign for its troops stationed in South Korea, as a third virus wave saw the host country record its highest daily death toll since the pandemic began. U.S. Forces Korea, or USFK, administered initial doses of the Moderna vaccine for military and civilian healthcare workers, first responders, and command staff across its medical treatment facilities in the country, according to their statement. Washington has around 28,500 troops stationed in South Korea to help it defend against the nuclear-armed North and protect U.S. interests in Northeast Asia. Among the inoculated included USFK Commander Robert Abrams, who was pictured receiving the shot in a mask and a T-shirt emblazoned with #KillTheVirus. The vaccination is voluntary, but the USFK chief strongly encouraged American service members to receive it. South Korea is one of the 4 overseas locations to receive the Moderna vaccine, which won emergency use authorization from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration on December 18. The inoculations came as a third wave of the virus grips the Asian country, with a resurgence centered on the Greater Seoul area, which has seen daily cases climb to over 1,000 several times this month, despite stricter measures. The country reported 1,046 new cases and 40 deaths on Tuesday, its highest daily toll since it first identified an infection in January.
Now, here in the Philippines, the Department of Labor and Employment on Tuesday said only returning OFWs, or overseas Filipino workers, from the United Kingdom and several other countries where there are cases of the new COVID-19 strain are allowed to enter the country. Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello III said President Duterte decided to allow Filipino workers from these countries, provided that they would undergo the mandatory 14-day quarantine. He reiterated that only OFWs are exempted from the travel restriction, but their relatives and other balikbayans are covered by the ban. Bello added that they expect some 60,000 to 100,000 to come home. The government ordered the ban on the entry of travelers from the UK and other countries. These are Denmark, Ireland, Japan, Australia, Israel, Netherlands, China, Hong Kong, Macau, Switzerland, France, Germany, Iceland, Italy, Lebanon, Singapore, Sweden, South Korea, South Africa, Canada, and Spain.
Indonesia is finalizing deals to secure 50 million doses of coronavirus vaccines from drug makers Pfizer and AstraZeneca. According to a Reuters report, the deal with AstraZeneca would be finalized before the end of the year, while an agreement with Pfizer would be signed in the first week of January. The health minister said 1.3 million frontline health workers, 500 of whom have died of COVID-19, would get priority in the vaccination drive. The country has had nearly 720,000 confirmed cases and 21,500 deaths, among the highest tallies in Asia.
In other news, India reported 6 cases of the new COVID variant who returned from the UK. They have been kept in isolation, India's health ministry said in a statement. They have been kept in isolation, according to them. In a statement, officials in India have begun contact tracing close contacts and family members of the 6 who have tested positive for the new variant. An official said passengers arriving from UK will undergo RT-PCR tests at all airports in the country. The samples found to be positive will then be genome sequenced by government-run labs in order to detect the new variant. With more than 10 million cases, India is the second worst affected by the virus after the United States. Nearly 150,000 people died in the world's second most populated nation. On Tuesday, 16,432 new cases of the virus were registered, a sharp drop from nearly 100,000 cases a day back in September. Reuters, a news agency, said India is likely to approve the vaccine being developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University for emergency use after its local manufacturer submitted additional data sought by authorities.
An extremely contagious variant of COVID-19, which originated from South Africa, that authorities have called extremely concerning, has made its way to Australia. The mutant strain has been spreading around the UK. Was identified in a return traveler who tested positive for COVID-19 in Queensland on December 22. Health authorities said genome testing confirmed the woman was carrying the new variant after she tested positive for COVID-19 while in hotel quarantine in Brisbane. Meanwhile, Queensland police have fined 5 Sydney residents more than $20,000 for allegedly lying on their border declaration passes. Chief Superintendent Mark Wheeler said 3 women and 2 men claimed they had not been in a hotspot in the previous 14 days while attempting to enter the state. Earlier this month, Queensland declared 35 New South Wales local government areas coronavirus hotspots, with all Greater Sydney residents banned from entering the state.
Can I give the public that assurance? I am not comfortable with having anybody outside the quarantine system who's come here from overseas. So if you're here from overseas, we expect that 14-day isolation. And of course, what we have been doing in New South Wales is providing on a daily basis, we have between 5,000 and 6,000 people in hotels, supervised by our police force, supervised by our health officials to make sure we keep the broader community safe.
Premier, have you heard from Cricket Australia about the test?
Well, I've actually spoken to the chair of Cricket Australia this morning. I think they're making their decision at around 11:30 this morning. Can I say, I don't want to take words out of their mouth, but they provided feedback to me to say that they've been very positive and very optimistic about the way in which we've been dealing with them as a New South Wales government. They did say they were concerned about the Queensland government's position and what that meant for their players once they finished the test here and went to Queensland. So can I please assure the community that we've been given advice from the health experts as to how to run a safe test. We've provided that information to Cricket Australia. The chair has been effusive in his comments in relation to the interaction he's had with our government. We're keen to see the test stay in Sydney, obviously, but we can't control what other state governments do. That's outside our hands. But we've also assured Cricket Australia that they'll be supported to make sure the event they put on is COVID safe and the advice we provide is the best available.
Back here in the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday night announced that Metro Manila and 9 other areas in the country will remain under general community quarantine status until January 31st, 2021. In a taped address, Duterte said provinces of Batangas, Isabela, Lanao del Sur, Davao del Norte, and cities of Santiago, Iloilo, Tacloban, Iligan, and Davao will also remain under GCQ until the end of January. Watch this.
To the Filipino people, kindly listen. The general community quarantine hanggang ngayon is NCR, Isabela, Santiago City, Batangas, Iloilo, Tacloban City, Lanao del Sur, Iligan City, Davao City, Davao del Norte. Modified general community quarantine for the rest of the country. Davao. January 1 up to 21. 31 rather. Nandito. Subject to LGU appeals. Wala na kung talagang if the medical statistics would show that there is really a spike, it's better to, better part of prudence is to just leave it as they are. Dito sa COVID strain, it's the same. The rule is, kung maaari hindi ka lumabas ng bahay, huwag ka nang lumabas. Kung marami kang utang, huwag kang lumabas talaga, mas lalo na. Kung may inano ka na anak na babae na niloko mo, huwag ka rin lumabas talaga, irritang ka ng tatay. So, it's stay home if it's really possible. Kung kaya mo lang, it's for your own good. And then the washing of the hands.
Also reminded the public not to leave their homes unless absolutely necessary. As of Monday, health authorities logged a total of 470,650 confirmed COVID-19 cases, of which 22,746 or 4.8% are active cases. A total of 104 patients recovered from the illness, raising the recoveries to 438,780, while 15 new fatalities brought the country's death toll up to 9,124. The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases is presently discussing efforts to prevent the entry of a new strain of coronavirus that emerged in the UK. Last Saturday, Duterte pitched for the creation of a new task force to focus on the new coronavirus strain that is reportedly more infectious.
The Philippines today banned all foreign travelers from the United Kingdom and 19 other countries and areas from entering the country following reports of a new strain of coronavirus found in the UK. In a memorandum issued by Executive Secretary Salvador Medaldea, it stated that effective December 30, 12:01 a.m. until January 15, 2021, or next year, all foreign passengers coming from 19 more countries will be banned from entering the Philippines. And these are Denmark, Ireland, Japan, Australia, Israel, the Netherlands, Hong Kong, SAR, Switzerland, France, Germany, Iceland, Italy, Lebanon, Singapore, Sweden, South Korea, South Africa, Canada, and Spain. Passengers who are already in transit and arrived before December 30, 12:01 a.m. from the said countries or areas listed will not be prohibited from entering the country. However, they will be required to undergo an absolute facility-based 14-day quarantine period despite a negative reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction or RT-PCR test result. Filipino citizens who are coming from or who have been to the same countries or areas within 14 days immediately preceding arrival in the Philippines will be allowed to enter the Philippines on the condition that they undergo an absolute facility-based 14-day quarantine despite a negative result. And the news continues. Zero and Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by Canreef Corporation, your vendor. Supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
It's time to take one step further and face the impossible. Time to search the unknown and fight for the truth. Time to overcome boundaries and connect the world. It's time for DW News.
Welcome back to the news. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque again announced timeline of the national vaccine roadmap and reiterated vaccine czar Secretary Carlito Galvez's statement that before the end of January, the contract for 150 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine will be secured. He also mentioned the Bloomberg study, which shows that the situation in the Philippines has improved from 46th to 35th place in the administration of the COVID-19 health crisis. Watch this.
Balikan po natin ang timeline, no? Pero wag po kayo mag-alala kasi meron namang programa rin po ang WHO at marami po tayong mahakbang na ginagawa na kumuha nga po ng vaccine doon sa mga bansa na hindi naman ganun kayaman gaya ng China, Russia at India. Pero balikan po natin ang timeline ng ating National Vaccination Roadmap. No? Sa unang bahagi pa lang ng 2021, inaasahan na darating na ang bakuna sa Pilipinas. Sana po makarating nga po ng Pebrero, pero yan po ang ating target, pero hindi po lalampas ang unang quarter na hindi po darating ang bakuna. Alam natin na bago ang first shipment, may pre-work na nangyayari, kinakausap ang manufacturer, advanced discussions, pagpirma ng agreement, at ang mga ito ay kasalukuyan na nangyayari. Hindi naging pabayang ang inyong pamahalaan sa bagay na ito. Sabi nga po ng ating vaccine czar, hindi po matatapos ang Enero next year na hindi natin maisasara ang mga kontrata para sa 150 million doses po ng bakuna. Malaki nga po ang tinaas ng ating ranking pagdating sa COVID-19 resilience. Tignan niyo po ito. Dati-rate nasa 46 spot po tayo. Ngayon po, nasa 35th spot na tayo ngayong buwan. Basta tuloy lang po ang pagsunod natin sa pakiusap ng Presidente, mask, hugas at iwas.
Indonesia will temporarily close its borders to all foreign nationals starting January 1 to 14 of next year. And the Philippine Embassy in Jakarta reminded Filipinos planning to travel to the neighboring country. In an advisory dated December 29, the embassy said only air crew holders of the Indonesian stay permit and holders of diplomatic or official visa for an official ministerial visit will be allowed entry within the said period. While exempted, these individuals will be subjected to safety protocols implemented by the government. These include presenting a negative RT-PCR test taken 48 hours prior to departure and retaking the RT-PCR test upon arrival. The embassy also said the exempted foreigner must also undergo a mandatory 5-day quarantine while waiting for the result. Indonesia's approaching border closure comes as several countries across the world try to keep out a potentially more infectious variant of SARS-CoV-2, which was already detected in South Korea and Japan, among others. Investigations are ongoing, but the World Health Organization said initial analysis indicates that the variant referred to as SARS-CoV-2 VUI 2020/01 variant under investigation near 2020 month 12 variant 01 may spread more readily between people.
In other news, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Monday announced a ban on selling alcohol and said face masks will be compulsory in public after his nation became the first in Africa to record 1 million cases. Watch this.
From now on, it is compulsory for every person to wear a mask in a public space. A person who does not wear a mask covering over their nose and mouth in a public place will be committing an offense. A person who does not wear a mask could be arrested and prosecuted. The sale of alcohol from retail outlets and on-site consumption of alcohol will not be permitted. The prohibition on consuming alcohol in public spaces like parks and beaches remains. Distribution and transportation will be prohibited with exceptions that will be explained by the minister.
Nations around the world are struggling with winter spikes in infections that have pushed the global caseload close to 81 million, even as the rollout of vaccines gathers pace in North America and Europe. Ramaphosa said Data showed excessive alcohol consumption leads to an increase in trauma cases reported at hospitals, causing an unnecessary strain on public health facilities.
Meanwhile, Belarus began a vaccination drive against coronavirus using the Sputnik V jab, becoming the first country outside Russia to use the vaccine developed by Moscow. Belarus, with a population of around 9.0 after the Soviet-era satellite.
Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. 4 Bangladesh Navy ships on Tuesday took the second and biggest group of Rohingya Muslims yet from crowded refugee camps to an uncertain future on a bleak island 3 hours from the mainland. The government insisted that the 1,800 refugees who have been in camp since fleeing a Myanmar military clampdown want to start new lives on Bhasan Char, where 1,600 others arrived earlier this month. But rights activists expressed new doubts about the transfers. They said some Rohingya had their shanty homes in the camps on the Myanmar border padlocked, so they had no choice. The Bangladesh government eventually wants to rehouse 100,000 of the camp's approximately 1 million Rohingya on the island, which takes the full force of cyclones that roar across the Bay of Bengal each year.
U.S. President-elect Joe Biden said that President Donald Trump's appointees at the Pentagon are stalling on the transition and warns that the United States faces security risks as a result. After he and U.S. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris were briefed by their transition teams on national security, Biden said that political appointees at the Pentagon, as well as the Office of Management and Budget, had put up roadblocks. Take a look.
As I said from the beginning, we have encountered roadblocks from the political leadership at the Department of Defense and the Office of Management and Budget. Right now, we just aren't getting all the information that we need for the outgoing administration in key national security areas. It's nothing short, in my view, of irresponsibility. And right now, as our nation is in a period of transition, we need to make sure that nothing is lost in the handoff between administrations. My team needs a clear picture of our force posture around the world and our operations to deter our enemies.
Staying in the U.S., the House of Representatives approves a motion to increase the direct relief payments to Americans, part of the coronavirus relief and stimulus package, from $600 to $2,000 in a 275 to 134 vote. The motion is likely to meet with resistance from Republicans in the Senate. Watch this.
On this vote, the yeas are 275, the nays are 134, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House voted Monday to increase the second round of federal direct payments to $2,000 as Democrats embrace President Donald Trump's calls to put more money in Americans' pockets. Trump last week threatened to block a massive pandemic aid and spending package if Congress did not boost stimulus payments from $600 to $2,000 and cut other spending. He backed down from his demands on Sunday as a possible government shutdown loomed, brought on by the fight with lawmakers. But Democratic lawmakers have long wanted $2,000 relief checks and used the rare point of agreement with Trump to advance the proposal, or at least to put Republicans on record against it in the vote on Monday, less than a month before he leaves office.
But even as Democrats helped secure approval for what the Republican president sought on stimulus payments, they spearheaded a House vote just a short time later to override his veto of a separate $740 billion defense policy bill. The rebuke in Trump's final weeks in office would be the first veto override of his presidency if seconded by the Senate this week. Take a look.
On this vote, the yeas are 322, the nays are 87. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the bill is passed. The objections of the president to contrary notwithstanding, the clerk will notify the Senate of the action of the House.
The Democratic-controlled House vote 322 to 87 to override Trump's veto of $740.5 billion defense bill, with 109 members of the president's own Republican Party siding with Democrats. A similar motion will be introduced in the Republican majority Senate, where it will also have to gain two-thirds support to override the president's veto. In a statement released after the vote, Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi slammed President Trump's veto as reckless and called on the president to end his 11th hour campaign of chaos.
In other news, the Meteorological Agency expects heavy snow and strong winds to hit areas or wide areas along the Sea of Japan coast from Wednesday through Friday. Snow is also forecast in flat areas along the Pacific coast. According to NHK, the agency said a very powerful cold air mass will bring heavy snow along the Sea of Japan coast from Hokkaido to Kyushu. Weather officials say that during a period of 24 hours from Wednesday evening, up to 70 to 100 centimeters of snowfall is expected in Niigata Prefecture and 60 to 80 centimeters in other areas of Hokuriku region. The western region surrounding Osaka and Hiroshima prefectures are expected to have 50 to 70 centimeters of snow. On Monday, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga reiterated his call for residents to celebrate the year-end and New Year's period quietly due to the spread of COVID-19 infections. A lighter than usual travel rush could ease the impact of the heavy snow. In normal years, trains fill up and long traffic jams form on expressways as people travel across the country to visit relatives.
The European Union on Tuesday demanded that China release citizen journalist Zhang Zhan and several other jailed reporters, lawyers, and human rights champions. The EU statement was issued just ahead of Brussels signing a major investment pact with Beijing, despite concern about China's labor and civil rights record. Zhang was jailed on Monday for 4 years over allegations of picking quarrels and provoking trouble during her coverage of the early stages of the COVID-19 outbreak in epicenter Wuhan, according to her lawyer. Prior to her detention, Ms. Zhang Zhan had been reporting about the coronavirus pandemic in Wuhan, according to EU Foreign Policy spokesman Peter Stano in a statement. According to credible sources, Ms. Zhang has been subject to torture and ill treatment during her detention, and her health condition has seriously deteriorated. It is crucial that she receives adequate medical assistance. Brussels also demanded the release of Yu Wensheng, a human rights lawyer jailed on December 13. Brussels' concern for the fate of Chinese rights activists and independent journalists comes despite the EU's push to sign a major investment pact with China this week.
A Hong Kong teenager was ordered to spend up to 4 months in prison on Tuesday for insulting China's national flag and unlawful assembly as Beijing increasingly targets prominent activists from the financial hub. Tony Chang, a 19-year-old who led a now disbanded pro-democracy group, was convicted earlier this month for throwing the Chinese flag to the ground during scuffles outside Hong Kong's legislature in May 2019. While serving his sentence, Chang will be waiting for trial over a charge of secession, which could land him life imprisonment, according to the draconian national security law Beijing imposed on Hong Kong on June 30. Chang is the first public political figure prosecuted under the new security law, which Beijing described as a sword to return order and stability to the financial hub after 7 months of massive, often violent, pro-democracy protests last year. He was sentenced to 3 months each for insulting the national flag and unlawful assembly and told to serve up to 4 months behind bars. The teen is also facing separate charges of money laundering and conspiring to publish seditious content. Chung was arrested by plainclothes police opposite the U.S. consulate in late October and had been remanded in custody since. Speculation has swirled that the authorities moved on Chung because he was hoping to ask for asylum at the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, 50 journalists and media workers were killed in connection with their work in 2020, the majority in countries that are not at war, Reporters Without Borders said on Tuesday. The figure shows an increase in the targeting of reporters investigating organized crime, corruption, or environmental issues, according to the watchdog. It highlighted murders in Mexico, India, and Pakistan. 84% of those killed this year were deliberately targeted for their work, RSF said in its annual report, compared to 63% in 2019. Mexico was the deadliest country, with 8 killed. Links between drug traffickers and politicians remain, and journalists who dare to cover these or related issues continue to be the targets of barbaric murders, according to the report. None of the Mexico killings had yet been punished, added RSF, which has compiled annual data on violence against journalists around the globe since 1995. 5 journalists were killed in war-torn Afghanistan, it said, noting an increase in targeted attacks on media workers in recent months, even as peace talks between the government and Taliban are ongoing. RSF also highlighted the case of Iranian opposition figure Ruhollah Zam, who ran a popular social media channel that rallied regime opponents and who was executed in December. His execution confirms Iran's record as a country that has officially put the most journalists to death in the past half-century, it said. And you're watching Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
This portion is brought to you by Kubert, an expert in air conditioning and electromechanical. Also engaged in structural, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, and sanitary services. Kubert, your ultimate NEPS and air conditioning solutions.
Hey there, Arnie Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net25.
Mga mahalagang pangyayari na naganap di lamang sa bansa, kundi maging sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo. Ating balikan sa Pilipinas 2020. Tinutukan ng Eagle News Team sa iba't ibang sulok ng bansa, pati na sa ibayong dagat. Pilipinas 2020. Hatid sa inyo ng Net25, Radyo Agila, EagleNews.ph at ang Eagle News Live. Pilipinas 2020. Abangan!
Welcome back to the news. Now here in the Philippines, the 18-kilometer Skyway project or Skyway Stage 3 project will be fully operational on January 14 next year, the Department of Public Works and Highways announced on Tuesday. Once it becomes fully operational, travel time from the North Luzon Expressway or NLEX to the South Luzon Expressway or SLEX will be reduced from 2 hours to only 30 minutes, while Makati City to Quezon City will only be 20 minutes away, DPWH Secretary Mark Villar said. The Skyway, a build project, partially opened on December 29. The Skyway is an elevated expressway spanning from Buendia to Makati to NLEX in Balintawak, Quezon City. Earlier, San Miguel Corporation President Ramon Ang said starting Tuesday, the use of the Skyway will be free to motorists for 1 whole month. The project has 7 available ramps: Buendia northbound on-ramp and southbound off-ramp, Plaza Dilao southbound on-ramp, Quezon Avenue northbound and southbound on and off-ramp, and Balintawak northbound off-ramp and southbound on-ramp. Villar said the Skyway Stage 3 project will eventually connect the NLEX Harbor Link, which opened this year, via the NLEX-SLEX connector in 2021. The NLEX-SLEX connector is an 8-kilometer elevated 4-lane toll expressway that traverses the NLEX southbound route from the end of Segment 10 along C3 Road in Caloocan to the Polytechnic University of the Philippines in Santa Mesa, Manila. It is expected to divert at least 35,000 motorists every day from EDSA and C5.
The London stock market soared Tuesday as investors gave their initial verdict on Britain's Brexit deal with the EU, while Eurozone equities also rose on upbeat U.S. stimulus news, with Frankfurt extending its record-breaking run. In opening deals, London's benchmark FTSE 100 index jumped 1.6% to 6,608.43 points, having last traded on December 25. Elsewhere, Frankfurt's DAX 30 index was up 0.4% to 13,845.94 points, extending Monday's record-breaking performance. The Paris CAC 40 also gained 0.4% to 5,608.52. Both key Eurozone markets returned Monday with bumper gains, buoyed by a pandemic recovery package agreed in the U.S. and Britain's Brexit agreement.
Now, sad news. French fashion designer Pierre Cardin, hailed for his visionary creations, but also for bringing stylish clothes to the masses, has died at the age of 98, his family told AFP. Take a look. He was born in Italy in 1922, but emigrated to France as a small child. Died in a hospital in Neuilly in the west of France, according to his family. He was only 14 when he started as a tailor's apprentice. At 23, he moved to Paris, studying architecture and working with the Paquin fashion house and later with Elsa, another fashion brand. In the French capital, he met the film director Jean Cocteau and helped design masks and costumes for the 1946 film La Belle et la Bête. He moved to Christian Dior in 1946, working as a pattern cutter on the feminine new look fashion of post-World War II. 4 years later, he opened his own fashion house, designing costumes for the theater.
And in NBA action, it was a family affair during the Golden State Warriors' first victory of the season against the Chicago Bulls on Sunday. Here's Tenny Sumagi for an update. Tenny?
Good evening, Alma. It was a family affair as Steph Curry's 36 points and his brother-in-law, Damian Lee, hit the game-winning three to lift the Warriors to a 129-128 victory against the Chicago Bulls Sunday night. Curry also hit a milestone, recording 2,500 three-pointers in his career, joining Ray Allen and Reggie Miller as the only players to hit that mark.
I just loved the way that our guys hung in there and fought through the second half. You know, it felt a couple times like the Bulls were going to pull away, you know, when they got 8-9 up just with a few minutes left. But, you know, there was time, and I love the way Kelly and Andrew fought defensively throughout the second half. They both brought great energy to the game and made a huge difference. And Steph got going, and what a moment for D. Lee. That's one he'll remember forever. So we needed that. It was just a great win, and everybody's feeling a lot better in that locker room.
First thought was we won the game. Second thought was, oh, that's my brother-in-law. Let's go. So it's kind of a cool moment, and you know, for him to be ready, step up, knock it down, it was huge for us.
The Warriors will conclude their road trip in Detroit tonight, tomorrow morning for our Filipino viewers before heading home to San Francisco to begin their home season opener against the Trailblazers on New Year's Day. In New York and Sumagi, April noon, we live in interesting times. Back to you all.
Brought great energy to the game.
Thank you very much, Denny, for your updates, for your NBA reports. Looking forward for more. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
It's always a pleasure to see Steph Curry. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. We'll see you again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.